orbit.
Live.
On board a small scientific experiment
Super.
to see if astronauts can grow food for themselves in test tubes.
Eating
It's
food
a
in
mini
space.
version of this setup.
Experiment.
Bubbling away is genetically modified yeast. It's
UK
producing
25.
proteins
Times down there, funds on the
into
right side screen,
powder,
please.
which can be turned into all sorts of food.
They can produce proteins, they can produce fats, they can produce carbohydrates, fibers, and then they can be combined to do different recipes and different type of dishes in the end.
Imagine having a 3D bioprinter and printing out the steak that you would like to have at the space station.
You could turn it into a steak.
Yes, that's the aim.
Right now, eating in space isn't a gourmet experience. Although the astronauts are enjoying themselves, the food itself isn't much fun. A lot of it is freeze-dried, they have the same things most days, and it's really pricey.
Is
The
it?
researchers are doing this experiment because
Blimey.
it's so expensive to send food into space. It costs around £20,000 to feed one astronaut for one day.
Bloody hell.
Those costs are only going to spiral
That's a lot of
if
money.
NASA achieves its aim of having tens and eventually hundreds of astronauts living and working in space. So,
That ain't cheap.
lab-grown food like this could be a cheaper and, believe it or not, tastier alternative. Jakob's job is to turn the chemistry into cuisine. All his ingredients can be lab-grown. They aren't yet, but he's practicing for the day they can. Making spicy dumplings today, but anything is possible.
Anything from French cuisine, Chinese cuisine, Indian cuisine, any kind of cuisine will be possible to be replicated in space, just because we will be able to produce different components.
Helen Sharman
It's
was
22nd of
Britain's
April
first
today,
astronaut
Tuesday morning.
when she went to the Soviet Union's Mir space station in 1991. What does she think of what could be the food of the future? Gorgeous, aren't they?
I think they're fantastic. I love the burst of flavour. They taste, I don't think I've ever really tasted anything exactly like that, but I would love to have that kind of thing in space.
Is it important to get the food right for astronauts in space?
One of the biggest problems actually is
Tuesday
that food
today.
is just boring in space. And so the astronauts tend to often lose body mass, we'd say lose weight on Earth, just because they're not eating so much, because they've not got that variety and that interest.
The experiment will be in Earth's orbit for
Really,
just
like
a
you lose
few
weight
hours.
and you're in space.
It'll be
That's
the
good news.
first of several experiments
If you're
in
overweight,
space
perhaps being an
to
astronaut into
develop
space is
technology.
a good idea.
If all goes well, astronauts on the International Space
That's a
Station
good base to go.
will be trying out some lab-grown food in just a few years' time.
But you'd be stuck in a tin box for at least 8 to 6 months or a year or so. You might find that a bit claustrophobic wise.
You are brilliant.
Espresso, wouldn't it?
Now, as you can possibly tell from these gorgeous images, wildflowers are hugely important to pollinating
They are for
insects like
diversity.
bees, but increasingly,
Biodiversity.
these plants are being lost to things like farming and housing.
It must have been backbreaking work, but a massive team of volunteers is trying to buck that trend. They've restored
they?
150 acres of wildflower grassland in Cumbria, as Adam Powell reports.
Well, you shouldn't cut your lawn until
Flowers
about
like these
June,
have become
really.
increasingly rare
Personally,
over the last
in my
80
opinion.
years. To reverse this, the cowslip is now being grown along with other wildflower species in
Obviously, sunflowers in your garden, weeds you want to take out your lawn, that's what I did today. You don't want to have in there like horse weeds or certain wildflowers you want to get out of there, take them out.
It's found on sort of edges of woodlands and hedgerows and things like that, but farmers and things are trying to make the best use of their land possible and are taking the hedgerows out now, so there's fewer of them.
That is sad.
Habitat lost to housing and more intensive farming is bad news for pollinators.
Well, the housing situation is the problem.
Encourage bees to
It's
thrive,
the main issue.
but it's wildflowers that are key to this most ancient of ecological relationships.
Our native pollinators and insects are adapted to feed off our native wildflowers, so we try to keep it native, local provenance seed, because they're adapted to collect the pollen.
That's why we don't cut the heather
our native
in certain
wildflowers.
parts of the UK, like around some parts of the UK, like some cemeteries now, or majority of them are actually not cutting the heath, not cutting the heather away now. They're leaving it.
8,000 wildflowers grown from seed were planted by hand by volunteers from sites including this one in Penrith. The results of the hard
protect the
work will be
wildlife.
enjoyed later in the summer. With so many wildflowers lost over the last 80 years, Cumbria Wildlife Trust is working with Kew Gardens to build up a seed bank of our native species.
Fascinating.
We collect all the seed locally and store it in these little jars in this big fridge. This is cowslip, and it'll have been possibly collected somewhere within Cumbria, so we can keep it as locally sourced as possible because the plants will be better adapted for the Cumbrian climate.
Gardeners can help too. Resist that temptation to mow the lawn, said the Trust, and let those wildflowers flourish as part of next month's No Mow May campaign.
That's
Adam
May.
Bell, BBC
Put a thumbs up on the right side of this question on Jones.
Thank you, Adam. Just giving me